Finance and for the Ministry of Planning and Development, as well as the Chairman of the United National Congress and Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. Joining me today is our very own Senator Wade Mark, Leader of the Opposition Business in the Senate, and he shadows the portfolio of Finance, Planning, Labor, Energy, and he's also Chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Before we begin the formal part of our press conference today, I ask you members of the viewing audience to stand with us and join in a minute of silence as we pay recognition and homage to our fallen hero, Mr. Basdeo Panday, former Chairman, former Prime Minister, and former Leader of the United National Congress. Thank you very much. Over the past few days, many have offered tributes to our first political leader of the United National Congress and fifth Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I am humbled to join these distinguished individuals in offering my own accolades on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of individuals whose lives are better today because of the extraordinary work of this remarkable man over the course of his incredible life of national service. I want to use this opportunity as well to thank all of you here and abroad who would have taken the time to write to the United National Congress, to communicate with your Member of Parliament and with the political leader of the UNC, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, in remembering the legacy of Basdeo Panday. Most of us already know the greatness of Basdeo Panday, and we will carry the memories of his inspiring life with us for as long as we live. But my message today is essentially and especially for those who must learn his story and be inspired by his improbable and inspirational path from rural Princestown to the Prime Minister's office. This message today, then, is for the 10-year-old boy in Couva and for the 11-year-old girl in East Port of Spain who just entered Form 1. This message is for the 14-year-old man in Scarborough preparing to sit CSEC exams and for the young woman who's about to embark on a second semester at university. Today's message is for every child, every boy and girl, every young woman and young man in Trinidad and Tobago who dreams bigger, who dreams about something better for their country, for their families, and for themselves. They must know that if Basdeo Panday can begin his life from the humblest of beginnings as a child of a poor family in Princestown, as a sugarcane weigher in the estate of Williamsville, as a primary school teacher in the Siram Memorial and at the St. Clement Vedic Schools, as a labor leader who organized his fellow workers and who led them to get up, stand up and demand their rights, as a member of parliament and as an opposition leader to ultimately become our country's and our nation's fifth Prime Minister. They must know that if Panday can achieve such greatness, such a climb, such a magnificent and magnanimous journey, that they too can accomplish any goal on which they set their sights and are willing to work to achieve. My colleague, Senator Mark, will deal with some of the issues relating to Mr. Panday and his transformational actions as a trade union leader. And like in the trade union sector, Mr. Panday has left a lasting legacy in the political sphere. A lot of the history has already been put in the public domain, so I wouldn't repeat them here. But it bears reminding the national population that for all of the years of Mr. Panday's political journey, of all the years of his political life, Mr. Panday has fought against the bitterness, spite, geographic discrimination, and divisiveness of the people's national movement. But every superhero has an origins story. And as chairman of the great party that he founded, I am privileged to highlight some significant aspects of Mr. Panday's inspiring beginnings. Dr. Hamid Ghani, writing in the Trinidad Guardian of October 7, 2001, recalled, and I quote, "Panday and the ULF were born out of a desire to unite the labor movement in this country by forming a political party that could reasonably address the issue of the division of labor by race." Under the theme, "Oil and Sugar Must Unite," Panday, Rafiq Shah, George Weeks, and Joe Young were at the vanguard of what many considered to be the first politically credible attempt to provide an alternative to the PNM. Although this attempt at unity was not as successful as he had hoped, Mr. Panday, undaunted as ever, tried again and again, never giving up, because he believed that a credible alternative to the people's national movement was desperately required should this country be able to afford success, development, and growth. Mr. Panday's commitment to the dream of national unity platform eventually culminated in the creation of the National Alliance for Reconstruction, which swept the polls in a historic landslide victory against the PNM, against PNM political hegemony in the 1986 general election. But this historic union fractured, and the dream of one love and national unity eluded Mr. Panday once more. But ever faithful to the cause, Mr. Panday joined with other visionary men and women and yet again called on the patriots of the cane fields, the patriots of the oil fields, the patriots of the labor movement, the patriots of the working class, the patriots of the business sector to unite. To that end, the cause for love, unity, and brotherhood, known otherwise as Club 88, was formed in March 1988 and heralded the dawn of a political force that was destined to bring positive change to our nation. You would think that we would have been despondent and demotivated by how things turned out following the euphoria of the 1986 NAR victory, but we weren't. In fact, it seemed to be just the opposite. We were desperate not to let the dream die, and that then just reignited a fierce determination within Mr. Panday and those he inspired to try and try yet again. Like many, I grew up in a family where the photograph of Mr. Panday occupied a place of reverence. In temples and prayer rooms. So when he called upon us again to unite in 1988, I was amongst those thousands who once again answered the call. I remember well, one afternoon after my class at the university was finished, at UB, I was attending UB at the time, was finished for the day, I joined some well-known political figures from the St. Augustine community and descended upon Rienzi complex full of revolutionary passion and patriotic zeal. There, we were met by legendary patriots, John Humphrey, Dr. Ramprasad Parasram, Dr. Prakash Prasad, and other national leaders. I had seen Mr. Panday on the platform before, but this would be the first time I had actually met him in person. and predictably, I was in absolute awe. His slight physical build was eclipsed by his larger-than-life presence. Full of charm and charisma, he quickly welcomed us with a joke. I was assigned the responsibility then of typing up the notes of a meeting which was being held in the conference room of the All Trinidad and General Workers Trade Union. On April 30th, 1989, Mr. Panday presided over the establishment of our great party, the United National Congress, at the National Stadium in Port-au-Spain, reflecting the national party that he had built and he aspired to create for the future generations. This represented a seismic shift in the political paradigms of the nation. The United National Congress was named after the African National Congress and the Indian National Congress, symbolically representing ethnic and cultural unity that has always been Mr. Panday's guiding principle. At the unveiling of the party's name and symbol in March of 1989, Mr. Panday explained the rationale behind our chosen designation, stating, and I quote, "United was meant to keep forever in our minds our long-sought dream. National, to indicate that unity is in the interests of the nation, all of its peoples. Congress, to reaffirm and reassess our commitment to consultation and participation by all of our peoples in the decision-making process that affect our lives and in the sphere of national patrimony." End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters, I graduated as an economist from the University of the West Indies at a time of austerity measures and structural adjustment. The woeful economic conditions of the late 1980s were hardly the kind of circumstances to make idealists out of economists. But as shiny new members of the nascent UNC, as shiny new members, our political leader, Basdev Panday, gave us hope. So in September 1990, upon Mr. Panday's appointment as leader of the opposition, I interviewed for the job of chief economist at the office of the leader of the opposition. I remember being ushered into the office by his then secretary, Mrs. Beverly Drayton. As I walked in, he asked me one question. He asked, "What do you honestly think is Mr. Basdev Panday's biggest flaw?" Well, without thinking, I responded with all the impulsiveness of my generation that I think Mr. Panday's biggest flaw is that he argues with people rather than arguing with issues. His characteristic amused smirk remained etched in my mind as he stood up, shook my hands, told me thank you, and showed me the door. I was crushed. I remember how disappointed my grandfather was because he was one of those persons whose temple featured Mr. Panday's picture as well. I remember how very disappointed he was and about how he described what he described as the brashness of my response. We were all sure that I had thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime. 1 week later, I got a call from Mr. Panday himself, listening to the phone with that voice echoing, asking me why I was not at work at his office. I told him that I thought that my answer had offended him and that I had botched the interview, especially given that I was only asked one question. He laughed, that booming laugh that he has, and said everybody else had told him what they thought he wanted to hear, but I was the only person who he interviewed who gave him an honest answer. And this was one of the endearing characteristics which cemented my support for Mr. Panday over the years. Here was a respected trade union leader, a practicing lawyer, and a very high-profile politician, and yet was willing to listen to an opposite view, even one personally critical of him, by a young man with no political experience or exposure. Over the years, I grew more comfortable in offering dissenting opinions to Mr. Panday when asked, leading him to christen me as Mr. Opposition. There's irony in that as well. an economist himself, having graduated from the London School of Economics and Political Science. We had numerous discussions on fiscal measures and economic policies, as he was committed to facilitating sustainable employment, higher government revenues, improved standard of living, affordable cost of living, and critically, lower crime. I looked forward to the occasions when Mr. Panday would come to Port of Spain for Parliament or for court, because then we would journey back to San Fernando together, giving us ample time and opportunity to talk about anything and everything. I would ask him questions of all sorts about life, politics, and law. He would invariably have a story of his own to justify and explain his own views on those issues thereafter. I heard of the development of his work ethic that allowed him to hold 3 full-time positions simultaneously, as I mentioned, lawyer, politician, and union leader. I heard of his determination to pursue his dream to become an actor and the personal sacrifices he had to pursue law and to simultaneously support his siblings as they pursued careers as well. I learned of his long hours as a laborer and trainee electrician to fund his studies in London. He spoke often about the importance of his family and his own young life growing up in poverty, but never realizing that he was poor because he was surrounded by community, fellowship, and love. In many ways, I think that it was his own experience of lifting himself out of poverty and confronting some of the challenges that he faced, which guided so many of his decisions as a politician that we speak of today. He was a gifted orator, communicating not only with commanding tones and a persuasive cadence, but with all the riveting gestures of a trained dramatist. But when he spoke from his heart, like a caring father from a genuine desire to uplift his people so that they didn't have to experience the difficulties that he himself had lived. Mr. Panday became the fiercest champion for the rights and welfare of working class from which and from whence he had come. He had often said in these discussions that, like Gandhi, his life must be his message. And so it was then, and so it is now. In November 1995, following a 17-17-2 election result, Panday Panday once again demonstrated his willingness to compromise in the interests of national development and to keep the dream of national unity alive. The alliance between the NAR and the UNC provided the opportunity for UNC leader Panday Panday to become Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Instead, Mr. Panday conceded power to A.N.R. Robinson, so that A.N.R. Robinson, the leader of the NAR then, which was a much smaller party, the leader then could have aspired and become the Prime Minister of this country. Mr. Panday then showing a willingness to self-sacrifice for the greater good, for what he saw as the greater good of the country. This turbulent time between 1995 and 2001 saw tremendous improvement throughout Trinidad and Tobago. This was when Mr. Panday fought the election and won 17-17-2 in 1996. During this period, Mr. Panday presided over substantial economic and infrastructural development. The alliance between the UNC leader, Panday Panday, and the NAR 17-17-2 with the 17-2 allowed Mr. Panday to become Prime Minister of this country. And during that time, Mr. Panday presided over the development of what would be called people-centered budgeting, and in particular, a focus on education, which has remained a hallmark of a UNC-led arrangement. It has remained a hallmark of the United National Congress. And this was also reflected in the 2010 to 2015 Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led administration, which saw, just like previously in the 1995 to 2001 period, an expansion and explosion of educational upliftment and development. Mr. Panday's commitment to national unity was underscored by his support of the spiritual Baptist community and the establishment of the Indian Arrival Day holidays, amongst other initiatives. He developed and passed the legislative framework that created critical institutions. These institutions that he established are evidence of his commitment to transparency, accountability, good governance, and sustainable development. Institutions like the Integrity Commission to end corruption, the Equal Opportunities Commission to end discrimination, the OSH Act to protect workers, the Children's Authority to protect children, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund to save for future generations, the Freedom of Information Act to provide transparency. These institutions were created as important aspects of his legacy and must be preserved at all costs. Today, ladies and gentlemen, the legacy of Basdev Panday is under attack by the very same political elements that Mr. Panday fought against for all of his political life. We cannot afford to let them be diminished. We cannot afford to let them be diluted or destroyed, as they are essential to the development of the kind of nation that Mr. Panday envisions. The Integrity Commission, ladies and gentlemen, is one of those many institutions that today has faced the wrath of the PNM. It seems that those institutions created by Mr. Panday for the development of democracy are all being undermined by the People's National Movement today, as they have done historically. Today, ladies and gentlemen, over the last few days, while we mourn the passing of Mr. Panday, who assisted in creating these institutions, we have seen a blatant and open attack against a critical institution, a critical element of the legacy of Basdev Panday. We have seen a deliberate attack by none other than the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is a despicable act, especially coming in the face of the passage of Mr. Basdev Panday. But it's a continuation of the actions of the Prime Minister from weeks, months, and years ago. Whenever he has been called to account for his actions, the Prime Minister has become a belligerent bull in a china shop. But the Integrity Commission, ladies and gentlemen, as I just indicated, was formed to ensure transparency and to end corruption. I want to quote from the Trinidad Guardian of today. The editorial of the Trinidad Guardian of today. I quote, ladies and gentlemen, from page 14, Guardian Opinion, Securing Integrity in Public Life. Since the formation of the Commission, every chairman has been attacked, making the institution a scapegoat or an object of ridicule and accused of being a tool of some nefarious third party. The chairman are made to appear as the alter ego, the embodiment of the Commission, even if they are not carrying out the investigations themselves. This is a deliberate technique used by people under investigation to rob the Commission of legitimacy and undermine its credibility and the public's trust in its operations. The irony of this approach is that the Commission is the one institution that could clear the air and clear the reputation of any politician. Why would any official, far less a Prime Minister, attack the Commission's credibility? The editorial continues, it is unfortunate, if not shameful, that a Prime Minister who came to power riding the horse of integrity in public life should resort to linking the Commission to ill-advised and politically motivated investigations. The Guardian editorial concludes, and speaking from this platform, I want to also endorse these statements. We wish to remind Dr. Rowley that the Commission is duty-bound to consider all complaints that come before it. It was regrettable that Dr. Rowley has so many assets that he seems to have forgotten to include a recently purchased townhouse in his declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, as we pay tribute to Basdeo Panday, this incident highlights the importance of his legacy. It highlights the very things that Mr. Panday fought against to ensure that there was an absence of corruption, to ensure that there was clarity and transparency. And as I said, it is a shame, it is a despicable act that at this juncture, it's a slap in the face of the legacy of Basdeo Panday that the Prime Minister is openly attacking the Integrity Commission, which was set up for the purpose of clearing political office holders. Mr. Panday's legacy deserves better. Clearly, we need to continue to defend the actions that Mr. Panday would have initiated. Clearly, we are fighting the very same battles that Mr. Panday has fought for all those years. You know, Mr. Panday's actions, his life, has inspired many, including me, to get involved in politics and to try to make a difference. And I'm proud to say that today, many of his jailers remain involved in politics up to today in various fields and in various forms of political service. Ladies and gentlemen, our country has lost two statesmen in the past week. And I would like to take a few moments to recognize another giant of a man, the first Secretary of Tobago, Mr. Ho Choi Charles. Let us, ladies and gentlemen, reflect upon the honor of a gentleman who fought for equal rights for Tobago, who even in his very last days continued to demand respect for all Tobagonians. Ho Choi Charles, in many ways, is and will always be the statesman who spoke forcefully and fearlessly of his firm belief that Tobago was as important to our nation as the island I stand in today. I wholeheartedly agree. There is no Trinidad and Tobago without Tobago. There is no future for this island without our sister island. We are one nation. We are Trinbagonians. Rest in peace, Mr. Charles. Rest in peace. Basdeo Panday fought hard for the causes and principles that mattered to him. We must continue to so do. Because if we fall short, ladies and gentlemen, we run the risk of the PNM doing to this country what they did for many years before the legacy of Basdeo Panday introduced these various bodies whose actions will focus on protecting the purse and the person of the public of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Panday fought very hard for his causes and the principles that mattered to him. But at the end of the day, at the end of the fight, he knew that those who disagreed with him were not his enemies. They were his fellow patriots who also cared deeply about our country and its future. Mr. Panday had said that before, that he doesn't see those persons who are opposed to him as his enemies. He saw them as his opponents. And while there are many reports of many bodies that Mr. Panday would have placed in the political cemetery, I think from my own recollection that many of those who he viewed as political opponents, many of those who he chastised publicly and otherwise, remain very, very close to Mr. Panday. In fact, many of those are now considered amongst his friends. So Mr. Panday was never a victim. He always rose above the allegations and the chastising, etc., of those who wished to bring him to a lower level. Because that was the mark of the man. He had said before, it's a well-known story. If you see a lion and myself fighting, feel sorry for the lion. Mr. Panday was nobody's victim. Far from that. He was a leader of leaders. And that will continue as long as we continue as a people to defend the positions that he took, to defend the very institutions that he established to protect us all. But Mr. Panday's rise to success is not a partisan political story. It is not a story meant for one party or for one racial or for one ethnic or for one religious heritage, or for one city, or for one constituency, or for one island. It is a story of our country, for every young person in Trinidad and Tobago, for every ethnicity, for every religion, for every one of us. It is a story for Laventille and for Endeavour, for Couva and for Cedrus, for Scarborough and for Speyside. It is a story for every girl and boy on our islands who dreams bigger and dreams better. This is the story of Basdew Panday, and let that story shine a light that allows us all to walk forward towards those dreams, both his dreams and ours, because generally they coincide. There's a wonderful proverb that I think most of you know, that is the best way I think that I can conclude my tribute today. Blessed is he who plants trees under those whose shades that he will never sit. Blessed is he who plants trees under whose shade he will never sit. Mr. Panday, Mr. Basdew Panday, planted 100, 1,000, 1 million of those trees for his country's future. Let us resolve to plant 1 million more. Nations, though, are nurtured by the legacies left by its most enlightened minds. Such legacies remind us to be kind to each other and not to merely tolerate each other. Mr. Panday's legacy teaches us that regardless of the differences in ethnicities, religious beliefs, status, and the like, we can come together to be a force to reckon with. Reflecting on Mr. Panday's lifetime of true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, I will end by quoting again from his 1989 address at the unveiling of the UNC's symbol and name. He said, and I quote, "We have had a dream of establishing a society that is founded on love, not hate, and suspicion and antagonism. A society in which we end that debilitating yoke of alienation that, like an albatross around our multiracial necks, has prevented us from creating a true, happy, prosperous nation. A society in which there is equity and equality for all." We give thanks to Almighty God for the life of Mr. Basdew Panday. As the political standard bearers of his legacy, we will never, never, never surrender. We will never give up the struggle that our founding father has bequeathed us. The House of the Rising Sun, the United National Congress, will continue to be the vehicle through which the children of taxi drivers, roti shop owners, single parents, and cane cutters receive the same opportunities as the children of privilege. Today we are again called to action. With high crime, high unemployment, high poverty, loss of opportunity, poor governance structures in education, health, and social support, today we are again called to action to continue the legacy of Mr. Basdew Panday. We in the UNC will continue to pursue one love and national unity until every Trinbagonian casts off the shameful colonial heritage of ethnic and geographic division. Mr. Panday inspired generations not to be passive spectators in their lives, to stand up for ourselves and to fight for what we believe we deserve. Whatever he saw that needed to be fixed, Mr. Panday stepped forward and made an attempt to fix it. Today, with high crime, ladies and gentlemen, the UNC, which is to use this opportunity to launch again an attempt to engage the national community to treat with a critical issue facing us in Trinidad and Tobago, which is crime. The Prime Minister has refused to meet to date, despite acknowledging and accepting that crime is a major factor creating us. We have done what Mr. Panday would do. We have decided to take the bull by the horns under the political leadership of Kamala Prasad Bissessa, and I wish to announce again today that on Monday, 15th of January 2024, at the La Jolla complex at 6 p.m., the United National Congress will be hosting its first anti-crime talks. I want to invite members of public, members of the business community, everyone who's affected by crime, and that should be 1.47 million people of Trinidad and Tobago, to please make your way to the La Jolla complex and let us continue to build, let us continue to fight, let us continue to engage each other for a better Trinidad and Tobago. Let us continue the legacy. I said that Mr. Panday inspired generations not to be passive. Let us consider that this is another opportunity to aspire to that legacy, to ensure that we are clear in our minds, just like Mr. Panday wanted us to focus on, that we are indeed now the architects of our own future, that our governance no longer lies in foreign hands that once held a royal scepter, but in independent Trinidad and Tobago hands that hold the right to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Panday could not have served our nation so faithfully without the love and support of his family. And today, on behalf of the United National Congress, the 120,000 members of the United National Congress, and the 1.4 million people that support this great party and this great country, I wish to extend our condolences once more to Mrs. Uma Panday and to the children of the Panday family and to the Panday family generally. Our prayers and support will always remain with you. It is my prayer that Mr. Bastido Panday's soul find liberation in the bosom of the Lord. I thank you, and may God bless our nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I now will turn over to my colleague, Senator Wade Mark. And Senator Mark has a long history as well with Mr. Bastido Panday, stemming back from the Union days and moving forward into the political life, tracing almost the same trajectory of the Panday's legacy. My brother, Senator the Honorable Wade Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much, our chairman, the Honorable Dave Tancoo. It is an honor for me to join with Dave on behalf of our great and glorious United National Congress, under the current leadership of our leader, Kamla Prasad Bisasa, in paying tribute to a warrior, to a fighter, to a giant, to a gladiator, gone but never will be forgotten. I speak of the late and great Honorable Bastido Panday. His struggle was our struggle. His trials and tribulations were our trials and tribulation. A man of the people. Today, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and I dare say the entire world, mourns the passing of a great statesman, a former prime minister, the first political leader of our party, and of course, a former trade union leader of sugar workers in our nation. His charisma, his vision, his mission and his objective combined. Have left a rich legacy. I would say from the very word go, from the very let go, Mr. the Honorable, the late and great Pastor Panday left an institution. The institution is the United National Congress, an institution that will live forever, because no individual is larger than an institution. And the Honorable Pastor Panday fought along us, along others, with us, to establish this institution that is known, that will be celebrating 34 years on April 30th, 2024. Brothers and sisters, the Honorable Pastor Panday provided me, when I was a member of the trade union movement then, education and research officer of the Bank and General Workers Union. I was also a member and a leader of a small political party called the People's Popular Movement. And in 1989, we dissolved and we joined the emerging United National Congress. Not only did I join as a member of this emerging great party back then, but I also joined a body of ideas espoused by the leadership of the United National Congress. When we launched, as my colleague and my brother said, on the 30th of April 1989 at the Jean Pierre Complex at the National Stadium in Port of Spain, we were committed then, as we are committed now, to a body of principles. The principles that Mr. Pastor Panday espoused and tirelessly fought for on behalf of the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of their color, their race, their creed, their religion, their region, their station in life. Those principles governed the party when it assumed governance in 1995 up to 2001. Those principles embody our party and are living testimonies of the power and the rich contribution of the founding father of our party. What were these principles, brothers and sisters? These principles were equality, justice, social justice, national unity, and a better way of life for every citizen in our nation. Of course, Mr. Panday was also committed to a system of meritocracy preach that and practice that. So when he became the leader of the opposition in 1990, October, I was invited to be a senator, and he appointed me, and I graciously accepted his appointment as a senator in the parliament, October of 1990. He was then leader of the opposition. But who were the 6 persons, including him, who formed the opposition in October of 1990? Basdio Panday, opposition leader, I recall. John Humphrey, Kelvin Ramnath, Trevor Sudama, Emmanuel Hossain, and Raymond Palakdari Singh. All of those persons were expelled by the then NAR, without whom victory was not possible in 1986. But they were all expelled. And we joined that new formation, that new political entity that emerged. And in 1991, the United National Congress fought its first election. But Dave, let me remind you that we were born on the 30th of April, as you rightly identified. But on May Day, the 1st of May, 1989, the United National Congress won its first by-election in a place called Guayco, Tamana. And who was our candidate? Ramjatan Ramdeen, better known as John Agitation. We were born to win. We were born on April the 30th, 1989. And on the 1st, May Day, International Working Class Day, victory came. We beat the PNM. We beat the NAR 2-1, and we beat the PNM. We, the UNC, victorious. And we moved as an emerging giant in this nation, fighting and defending the interests of the poor, the downtrodden, the marginalized, the vulnerable, the voiceless, the powerless. The United National Congress was that instrument created by Mr. Panday in order to defend the interests of the working people of our country. And they've in less than 1 year, an election was called, and the United National Congress won 13 seats. We moved from 6 seats to 13 seats in the space of 1 year. I was then asked by Mr. Panday to serve as leader of opposition business in the new parliament in 1991, which I graciously accepted. And we worked as a team, and we worked hard against the PNM. And a snap election was called in 1995. And we moved from 13 seats to 17 seats. Dave has already indicated to you, and a coalition was formed, and Mr. Panday emerged as the first Prime Minister coming out from the United National Congress, as our first political leader first Indo-Trinidadian and Tobagonian to lead this country. The first Hindu, the first labor leader to become Prime Minister of our republic. But you know, his commitment to equality, to social justice, to national unity, to inclusion, and improving the quality of life of every citizen began to manifest themselves as soon as we got into office. The first thing that comes to mind, Dave, was when the Honorable late and great Pastor Panday lifted a ban that was imposed by Dr. Eric Williams, then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, against who? Kwame Ture, better known as Stokely Carmichael. He was banned by the PNM. A man who was born on Oxford Street, left here at 11 years to join his parents in the United States, became a powerful civil rights leader alongside Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, fighting for black equality and justice and racial equality in America. We should have been proud to embrace him. Instead, what did the PNM do? The PNM imposed a ban on Stokely Carmichael, known as Kwame Ture. It took the United National Congress, it took Basdio Panday, our Prime Minister at that time, to lift that ban and allow Kwame Ture, Dave, to come back home. I was at the airport with Ralph Maraj, Foreign Affairs Minister, because I must tell you, I had the distinct pleasure and privilege of being asked by Mr. Panday to serve in his cabinet of 1995, which I graciously accepted. And we served there, and I served as the Minister of Public Administration and Information. And we met Kwame Ture at the airport. And he met with Mr. Panday. Mr. Panday didn't stop there. Kwame Ture at that time was not well. And Mr. Panday brought a note to cabinet to contribute to the medical expenses of Kwame Ture. That was the quality of the gentleman. That was the quality of the giant. That was the quality of the icon, Mr. Basdio Panday. Then we fought for the Baptists to get their public holiday. Williams promised a public holiday, never delivered. Patrick Manning promised a public holiday, never delivered. You know who delivered? It was Basdio Panday. And we celebrated the first public holiday for the Baptists, Shanta Baptists, on March 30th, 1996. Never forget that it was Mr. Panday who brought in 1999 the Orisha Marriage Act, which allowed Orishas to marry and to be legally recognized in Trinidad and Tobago after decades of discrimination. So Mr. Panday, larger than life, contributed enormously and translated into reality all his principles that he stood and fought for: equality, unity, social justice, and inclusion. Members of the media, brothers and sisters, we have lost a monumental and phenomenal figure, an individual. He has made a rich contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to deal with his contribution to the labor movement, particularly whilst he was Prime Minister and even before. As President General of the All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union, Basdio Panday fought, even though he was subject to brutality by the PNM in March of 1975, Bloody Tuesday. He never turned back. He fought for the sugar workers, and they got guaranteed work all year round rather than seasonal work, 6 months in the year. He abolished child labor in the sugar fields. He brought about equality of pay for women and men in the sugar industry. He brought about 100% increase in wages for sugar workers from $5.04 to $10.08. Basdio Panday. He introduced low-cost housing for sugar workers in our country. He has made a tremendous contribution to the workers in the sugar industry. And I want to put on record, Basdio Panday did not close down the sugar industry when he was Prime Minister. Basdio Panday sought to preserve and expand but diversify, conscious of the challenges facing the sugar industry. It was Patrick Manning and a fellow called John Rahel who combined, slaughtered, butchered, destroyed the sugar industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So I saw somebody writing a story in the papers talking about a complicated story involving Panday and Carney 1970. What is complicated there? There's no complications. So when it comes to labor and it comes to the workers, the Honorable, the late and great Basdio Panday made an indelible and rich and lasting contribution to the workers and of the offspring of those workers in Trinidad and Tobago. Never forget that under his reign, when he was Prime Minister, the first national minimum wage was established in Trinidad and Tobago. First national minimum wage. We abolished sectorial wages that was confined only to categories of workers, whether they were petrol workers, restaurant workers, whether they were shop assistants. And when a wage increase takes place at the minimum wages level, it goes across the board to all workers in Trinidad and Tobago. Panday. So workers who are now enjoying from the 1st of January 2050 per hour minimum wage over Panday must be credited for that. Not only did Mr. Panday introduce the national minimum wage, I want to tell Trinidad and Tobago today that Mr. Panday was strongly committed to the young. He was committed to the elderly. He was committed to women. And he was committed to the working people of our nation. So in the case of the elderly, Mr. Panday, when he became Prime Minister, on a budget of $12 billion, Dave, we never beyond, we in 1996 had a $12 billion budget. And under Yetman, it went to $15.9 billion, 16 billion. So between 1996, 12 billion, to the end of our term in 2001, the budget of Basdio Panday never exceeded $16 billion. But you know what he was able to accomplish? You know what he was able to achieve for the elderly in our country? He increased the old age pension from $356 per month, Dave, to $420 in 1997. He didn't stop there. The following year, in 1998, he increased old age pension by another $100, moving it from $420 to $520 per month, $520 per month. It didn't stop there. In 1999, he increased it by another $100 rather, taking it from $520 to $620. So in 3 consecutive years, Basdio Panday increased the senior citizens grant, senior citizens pension rather, from $356 per month to $620 per month. Remember, he also increased the income ceiling from $5,000 to $7,000 to permit persons who were receiving national insurance to access pensions. That was a legacy, an achievement, an accomplishment of Mr. Panday. Mr. Panday was able to make 5,000 casual and temporary daily workers, hourly and weekly workers, permanent. They were permanently engaged under Basdio Panday. And also workers in the public service who did not receive a pension for years and decades of service through the pension law reform law, the law reform on pensions introduced in 1997 or thereabouts. Any public servant serving more than 10 years was entitled to pension in the public service. And the pension was also transferable. I raise all these things to let Trinidad and Tobago know that Mr. Panday, although he spent 6 years as Prime Minister in office, he had only a minimum of $12 billion in the national budget of 1996 and a max of 16 billion at the end of 2001. But he was able to achieve phenomenal advances for the working class. He zero-rated several items, food items, that caught the 15% value-added tax at that time. Whether it was cheese, whether it was curry, whatever he was able, several items were zero-rated under the distinguished and former leader of our party. Honorable members of the media, brothers and sisters, I want to also remind Trinidad and Tobago that the Honorable Basdio Panday, the late and great Basdio Panday, also provided land in the Trin City community to Pan Trinbago to build their own headquarters. I think people forget Mr. Panday, and in terms of his rich contribution and legacy to national development, to nation building, to social, economic, political, and labor development in our nation. Even culture did not escape him. Dave, I do not know if you remembered Mr. Panday telling Trinidad and Tobago in 1985, he moved a private member's motion to acquire the Bennett Farms, now known as Palmies. He moved the motion. It remained there for 10 years. And when he became Prime Minister, it was the UNC that acquired the Bennett Farms that today is now Palmies Park. You have to remember the contribution of Basdio Panday. So he was involved in the environment, in aesthetics. He provided space, open spaces for the people of South Trinidad, right? Through Palmies Park. Mr. Panday, in an effort to give the ordinary man and woman a chance to own a vehicle in 1996 in the budget, introduced what is called second-hand cars, the used car industry. Today, that particular sector has grown by leaps and bounds, but of course they have come under attack by the PNM as they seek to protect their friends who import fully completed vehicles at the expense of the used car industry. That contributed to the expansion and the growth of the middle class in Trinidad and Tobago. Ordinary people could not have purchased a car. Mr. Panday allowed ordinary men and women to own their own vehicle. Some of them became so enterprising, Dave, that some of them had 2 and 3 vehicles, all as a result of the opportunity given in legislation and policy in the 1996 budget of Mr. Basdio Panday. So I think it's important that we recognize that Mr. Panday played an enormous role in the development, the growth, diversification, and transformation of our nation. And may I remind Trinidad and Tobago, in order to remove the cloak of secrecy and to allow the sunshine of transparency and scrutiny into public affairs, Mr. Basdio Panday passed, as Dave reminded us, a suite of legislation, very deadly in the hands of opponents and or rivals. But he was not concerned. Nobody forced Mr. Panday and the UNC to pass this suite of legislation. What were they? The Judicial Review Act, the Freedom of Information Act, the Equal Opportunity Act, the Integrity in Public Life Act. Those were deadly weapons in the hands of any opposition. But those things were done voluntarily because of our commitment to equality, to social justice, to national unity, to inclusion, and to ensuring every man, woman, and child had a improved quality of life in our Twin Island Republic. For the first time, the executive came under scrutiny and accountability. That was under Mr. Basdio Panday. And how was that done? Mr. Basdio Panday was able, with the support of the party he led in the parliament, to bring about a measure called the Constitution Amendment Act. You know what Constitution Amendment Act did? It brought Parliament into the 21st century. It brought about departmental committees. If you go under Section 66A of our Constitution, those departmental committees came into being in 1999, and those remain as we speak today. So it made the executive accountable for the first time to the Parliament and to the legislature. And Dave, I don't know if you're aware that it was under Mr. Basdio Panday that the Red House was designated as the exclusive seat of Parliament and the legislature. It was under him that Parliament was designated as the exclusive seat of the legislature. Prior to that, you would remember the days when you had Ministry of Legal Affairs in the Red House. All those, even a court, a high court, was upstairs. All of those bodies and institutions and organizations were moved out in order to designate the Parliament, right, as the exclusive seat of the legislature. Panday and the UNC. And that is why I make a distinction between vision, mission, objectives, and those achievements that followed it, and the institution. The United National Congress is an established institution in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not a fly-by-night organization. It's a living organism of the people. It's an instrument that was brought into being by the people. I can never forget that day when the people gave the mandate to Basdio Panday and the group that had formed Club 88 in the mud, in the slush, in the rain at Arangwen Savannah on the 16th of October. 40,000 people braved the rain, the mud, and the slush to give the caucus of love, unity, and brotherhood led by Basdio Panday the mandate to form the United National Congress, which became the instrument in defense of the oppression of the PNM at the time. I want to say, before I leave this particular platform, the intensive political victimization that Basdio Panday suffered at the hands of the PNM. We will say more about that at the appropriate time. But I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to be reminded of the persecution and prosecution of Basdio Panday, the first Prime Minister they had placed in jail by a chief magistrate who is now dead, and may his soul rest in peace. But the evidence that came out is that there was collusion between that chief magistrate and a former attorney general in order to influence the outcome of that particular prosecution. So Mr. Panday became a victim of PNM brutality and PNM victimization. And the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago must never forget the cruelty, the callousness, the heartlessness of the PNM and their persecution and prosecution of the Honorable late and great Basdio Panday. Brothers and sisters, before I close, I want to make two small points and then I will wrap up. The Prime Minister of this country should be ashamed that today is the 7th of January and thousands of police officers are still to receive their so-called measly, meager 4% back pay. They went to Parliament. They announced in Parliament, big fanfare, back pay for Christmas. They bullied, they terrorized the workers, whether they're police officers, firefighters, whether they be prison officers. They bullied, terrorized these people into accepting the so-called 002 in one period and 002 in a second period, threatening them to take them to the special tribunal, and did take them to the special tribunal, knowing full well that once you go before them, it's a 5-year agreement and no longer 3-year. And after you make all that song and dance, today, you cannot even give these people that measly and meager 4% back pay. The Prime Minister, the Minister of National Security, and the Minister of Education all have to take collective responsibility for this debacle that is facing police officers. And the United National Congress condemns the heartlessness of this government, the contempt and the insult that they are showing towards our police officers. So we call on the Prime Minister, stop attacking the Integrity Commission. And I want to ask the President of this country, is the President is part of a tag team? I ask the question, is the President of the Republic part of a tag team? Was the Prime Minister not aware that the term of office of the Chairman of the Integrity Commission was coming to an end on Thursday of this week? If he was aware, was that the reason why he launches blistering and vicious and unprovoked attack on the integrity of the Chairman and by extension the Integrity Commission? What does the Prime Minister have to hide? Why is the Prime Minister scared of the Integrity Commission? My information is that this is the first Prime Minister that has been under investigation by any Integrity Commission on no fewer than 5 occasions. What is this Prime Minister doing so wrong that the Integrity Commission is called upon by citizens to investigate a Prime Minister who always claims that he is above reproach? Well, if you're above reproach, why are you reducing the allocation to the Integrity Commission? When Kamla Persad Bissessa was Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and they accused us of all kinds of things, including corruption, what did she do? Did she starve the Integrity Commission? You know what she did? The highest allocation of close to $87 million ever given to the Integrity Commission was given by the Honorable Kamla Persad Bissessa in 2014. Fast forward, Imbert and Rowley have combined to subvert, undermine, and to make the Integrity Commission ineffective by offering them only $12 to $13 million. Their staff have been reduced from 63 to 36. Look, it is the first time that the Integrity Commission has taken a government to court to ask the court to rule as an independent body whether they should not be given appropriate resources to carry out their mandate. First time. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, this is shocking, this is unacceptable, and we condemn the Prime Minister, this gangster type Prime Minister that we have in office, for being so arrogant and contemptuous towards the Integrity Commission. And I'm calling on the President of this Republic. We are waiting and we are looking to see what you're going to do with the Chairman of the Integrity Commission. Whether the START team will remove him and put a puppet in his place and put puppets to replace the Integrity Commissioners so that Dr. Rowley can have his wish. Focus less on politically motivated investigations, whatever that means. Whatever that means. Whatever that means. So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning, we join Trinidad and Tobago. We join our leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisasa. We join our 120,000 members. We join the hundreds of thousands of sympathizers, supporters, well-wishers, and friends of the United National Congress in mourning the passing of a great soul, of a great soul, a legend, an icon, a giant, a gladiator, struggling at all times, never ever backing back, always moving forward, no retreat, no surrender. That was forward, always moving forward. That was the mettle of the man. A fighter for the working poor, the working man, the people of our nation. Today, Dave and I join our party and our leader and all the people of Trinidad and Tobago in celebrating the life of a great citizen of our republic, a liberator, a freedom fighter. We join him. We join his family. We extend, as Dave has extended, our collective condolences to Oma, to the daughters, to the children, to the family, to the friends, to the associates of the late and great Basdio Panday, former Prime Minister of our great republic, our beloved republic, first political leader of our great and glorious institution called the United National Congress, trade unionists, brothers and sisters, a man who was a lover of the arts, a man who was a lover of culture, a man who believed also in the environment. We celebrate him today. We pay tribute to him at this hour, at this moment. And we pray that Almighty God would bless his memory, would take him into his bosom, and allow him to have eternal rest and peace. And may he rise in perpetual glory when all the saints come marching home. We salute a soldier. We in the UNC salute a warrior. We in the UNC salute a fighter for equality, for justice, for national unity, and for inclusion of every man, woman, and child in the developmental process in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, may the Honorable late and great Pasdio Panday soul rest in peace and rise in perpetual glory. I thank you. We will now invite any questions anyone would like to raise at this time. And Dave is here, I am here, and we are willing to answer any questions that person would like to raise.
Is the party being represented at the service on Tuesday?
So on Tuesday, as we all know, the funeral service, the state funeral will be held. The party will be represented by all members of parliament who have received invitations to join in the state funeral. But I would like to ask all nationals, all supporters, all who have been influenced positively by the life of Mr. Pasdio Panday to join us. The funeral procession will be leaving Sapper and going to the Mosquito Creek for cremation. Join us at the Mosquito Creek. I believe from the notice that we have received that the funeral service will leave Sapper at 12:45.
Okay.
And will then proceed to the Mosquito Creek for cremation. I'm inviting members of the public, join us at the Mosquito Creek as we pay final tribute to this legend, the founder of our political organization, the United National Congress, and a man whose actions, whose policies have impacted Trinidad and Tobago for decades before and will continue to do so for decades to come. So join us at the Mosquito Creek from about 12:40 thereabouts as we pay tribute to Mr. Pasdio Panday.
Final question, and it's to both of you to answer individually. Mr. Tancoo, what is your favorite personal memory of Mr. Panday that the average person would not know?
I mentioned it today in my presentation that when I was asked what was the one flaw that Mr. Panday had, and I said that he put issues before persons and he would argue with persons rather than issues. I have come to realize in hindsight that I was completely wrong. But I was very impressed back then that Mr. Panday was embracing of views of young people, even when they were personally against him. He never took offense. He may have been abrasive and quick-witted in his commentary, but he never took offense. He was always about building and about national unity. His willingness to listen to opposing views is what impacted on me most and affected my life as a young person growing up in the politics.
Senator Mark, I think you are one of the people here that would have known Mr. Panday best. But sadly, many of our young people, to them, it's just a name that they would have heard in social studies. What message would you like to tell under 25, under 18 secondary school students about the legacy of Mr. Panday and how that his legacy will impact where they are today?
I would like to tell young citizens of our republic, that one of the great lessons that we can extract from the life of this departed son of the soil is that riveted commitment to principles, to values, and to objectives. Basdio Panday was an individual that was always committed to what he described as the collective happiness of the entire nation, man, woman, child. That was what kept him going. That is what generated the love for Basdio Panday. Because everything that he did, whatever action he embarked upon, whatever ideas he formulated, the bottom line was that constant Northern Star objective of using the resources of the state whenever you assume government to bring about the happiness of the greatest number using the resources of the state. So I would call on young people to pay attention to fundamental principles, principles that Basdio Panday endorsed and espoused: equality, social justice, unity of the people, meritocracy, and at all times focus on honesty, truth, and integrity. Those are very critical principles and values that young people need to embrace and deliver in their daily interaction with their fellow human beings. Once we accomplish these principles, once we internalize those particular principles and values, I think that Mr. Panday, even though he has passed, I believe his legend, his contribution will continue to live on.
Thank you, Senator. I want to also encourage persons to sign the condolence books that have been established throughout the country. We have a condolence book which is also located at the headquarters here, at the office at Tunapuna as well. And I want to encourage individuals. There are other corporations that have condolence books. Some MPs' offices have condolence books. It's been publicly advised that the condolence book will also be at SAPA tomorrow and on Tuesday. And I want to encourage individuals, and at the Red House, and I want to encourage individuals to find the time and leave a lasting notification of how much this gentleman has impacted our lives as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Senator Mark, I invite you to sign condolence book here at the UNC headquarters. I asked her about it, she said not to do it. Oh. I asked her. I told her that there's several announcements I wanted to make. The Monday tribute. In fact, I'll do it. She said that. I'll do it.
If you want it to sign, let's fix it.
Thank you, Senator. I also want to use the opportunity today to invite members of the public to an event being hosted tomorrow in commemoration of Mr. Panday's love for culture. It's going to be held at the water park in Debe, and it will be a tribute being placed there by the constituents of Oropouche East. So join us at 6 p.m. I believe it will start. It's going to be held at the water park in Debe, and it will be a tribute being placed there by the constituents of Oropouche East. So join us at 6 p.m. I believe it will start. Join us for a celebration of the life and times of Basdeo Panday in song, in classical singing, something that Mr. Panday had a particular passion and love for, at the Debe Water Park, starting at 6:30 thereabouts, during this difficult period. I thank you all very much.
Thank you.